The biggest fluke wins in UFC history, guys. That's what I wanted to come on here and talk about today. And when I say fluke, I don't necessarily mean like the other guy didn't deserve to win or he wasn't good enough to win. I just feel like the better fighter on that night lost for one reason or another. Maybe one guy was dominating and the other guy came back to get a Hail Mary finish. That's what we're here to talk about today, guys. So let's get right into the video, starting off with one of the biggest flukes in Bisping versus Rockhold 2. Now, one could say that it wasn't a fluke. Rockhold came in overconfident and got KO'd for it. And while that may be true, let's look at what happened, guys. Luke Rockhold had already fought Michael Bisping at UFC Sydney in 2014 in Australia. And Luke Rockhold destroyed Michael Bisping. He landed a head kick and then submitted him with a guillotine. So, going into the rematch, Rockhold was scheduled to face Chris Weidman in a rematch for the championship belt. Chris Weidman pulls out due to injury 2 weeks out. Michael Bisping steps up. And Michael Bisping, although on a 5-fight win streak, he was a journeyman. Rockhold had already beaten him, so everybody was like, what is Michael Bisping going to do to Luke Rockhold, who's in his prime? Rockhold's going to go in there and destroy Bisping. And honestly, I thought that this was an easy fight for Rockhold. Watching it live, I couldn't believe it. Bisping was coming off a movie set. And what do you know? First round, left hook Larry. Michael Bisping KOs Luke Rockhold, takes his soul, takes his belt. And respect to Michael Bisping, because he actually became champion with one eye. Before Serra Bullet's going to do it, if that happens. But, yeah, man, this was crazy. I still think, to this day, Luke Rockhold was always the better fighter. Michael Bisping just got one up on him because he was cocky. And, yeah, man, Luke Rockhold never was the same after this fight. So maybe you could say that left hook Larry took his soul. Either way, it was nice in a way to see Michael Bisping shut Luke Rockhold up. If you saw the post-fight press conference after this fight, it was quite entertaining, I'd say. Michael Bisping just torturing Luke Rockhold. This was also the last fight where they did like the press conferences after the fight with all the fighters. UFC 200 is whenever they started the single fighter post-fight press conferences. So that's a little fun fact for you guys. But yeah, and also if you look, Luke Rockhold was a 9-1 favorite over Michael Bisping, the 5-1 underdog. So yeah, it's safe to say that most people were riding with Rockhold to finish Bisping again. Let's move on to the next one, guys. We got Nunes versus Pena. Now, this one happened in 2021, I believe. Nunes was at the absolute top of her game. A 12-fight win streak, double champ, 7 total title defenses, finished every former champion in Holly Holm, Chris Cyborg, Ronda Rousey. Like, she destroyed everybody. She was clearly the better fighter. Pena was kind of a journey woman fighter going in, 2-2 going into her, going into this fight with Nunes. She had been submitted by Valentina Shevchenko and Jermaine Durandamy, of all people. The fact that Juliana Pena, the standing bantamweight champ, got submitted by Jermaine Durandamy is hilarious, who's now retired. But in the fight, Amanda Nunes definitely looked off. She later said she was sick going into the fight. Who knows? But she looked off. She looked slow. She looked sick, honestly. And I think Juliana Pena was able to lock up a rear naked choke in the second or third round. And yeah, man, I think this is a fluke victory. I think the better fighter on the night and Amanda Nunes by far lost. Dude, Amanda Nunes is miles better than Juliana Pena. Juliana Pena, first of all, shouldn't be champion right now because she won 100% loss to Raquel Pennington. Not that I care about Pennington being champ, but let me just go on a little rant. Pena calling out Amanda Nunes after her beating Raquel Pennington recently, so to speak, was embarrassing. She should have called out Kayla Harrison. Either way, Amanda Nunes proved it was an absolute fluke in the rematch, completely dismantling. I mean, she rearranged Juliana Pena's face. So Amanda Nunes, definitely the better fighter between the two. Just because Pena got a submission that wasn't even locked all the way in, and Nunes kind of gave up in that fight versus Amanda basically lost. I mean, Amanda lost more than Pena won, if you know what I'm saying. If you know, you know. Either way, I thought this was a fluke win. Amanda Nunes was 11-1 favorite to win, and yeah, man, she got upset. Respect to Juliana Pena, but I do think it was a fluke win, and I think Amanda battering her in the rematch also proved that. Let's move on to the next one, guys. We got Matt's. Oh, this one's for the old heads. The old heads in the chat, drop a like in the comments and let me know if you're an old head like myself. Matt Serra versus GSP. I think this happened in 2007. Listen, Matt Serra, an absolute journeyman. He was on like a 3-fight win streak coming into this fight. GSP, one of the best fighters in the world at the time, and would prove to be the welterweight GOAT going forward. So this was a crazy upset. Matt Serra going into the fight with GSP was a 8-1 underdog, and yeah, like I said, he was a journeyman. And man, Matt Serra knocked out GSP and actually made GSP tap the strikes, which is actually crazy when you think about it. And I think this is one of the biggest flukes in UFC history. GSP proved it was a fluke, and he was the more skilled fighter, literally destroying Matt Serra in the rematch. And I mean brutalizing Matt Serra in the rematch, showing that Matt Serra did not belong in there with him. It was a lucky punch at the end of the day. Georges St-Pierre got caught. And I think after that fight was when Georges St-Pierre said he went on to start to be a little bit more cautious, because he didn't, after he got finished at one time, he wanted to be more safe and not risk getting finished again. But either way, respect to Matt Serra, a one-pump chump who got it done over the great, brother, you intoxicated, brother. We need to check this. Georges St-Pierre. Georges St-Pierre beat every fighter he's ever fought. If you don't know, now you know. That's a fun fact. 20-2, he beat both Matt Hughes. Georges St-Pierre has only lost the guy's named Matt. How cool is that? How funny is that? So, yeah. Let's move on to the next one, guys. So, we got Derek Lewis versus Alexander Volkov. Now, I added the stats on the screen for this one because statistically speaking, this is one of the craziest comeback knockouts of all time. Definitely a fluke. I think if these guys fought today, Volkov would absolutely school Derek Lewis. And he did school Derek Lewis in the first fight. I mean, he quadrupled him on strikes, 70% accuracy. He was just busting up Derek Lewis on the feet. The thing about Volkov is he doesn't have the most power. And yeah, man, I'm not going to lie. This post-fight interview by Derek Lewis after this win was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. This was the definition of a Hail Mary KO. Volkov's in there. He's piecing up Derek Lewis. There's like 15 seconds left in the fight. Derek Lewis lands a huge right hand and, yeah, knocks out Alexander Volkov with 11 seconds to go. Volkov might have even been undefeated in the UFC at this point. I'm not sure. But, yeah, man, then he gets on the mic and talks about, you know, the stuff he talked about. If you don't know this post-fight interview, then you don't know. But, yeah, man, just look at the stats on the screen. Like, statistically speaking, this is one of the craziest comebacks in UFC history, but I think it was a fluke. I think the better fighter lost. Alexander Volkov showed to be levels ahead of Derek Lewis and just got caught on the chin at heavyweight. And yeah, man, it doesn't matter who you are at heavyweight. You get caught on that little chinny chin and you're going down to the ground, son. So, yeah, Derek Lewis, once again, his balls were hot and he got the KO. So, you know, it is what it is. Let's move on to the next one, boys. The next fluke on this list, we got Paul Craig submitting Magomed Ankalaev. If you guys don't know, if you're a casual like myself, you might not know this, but Paul Craig actually gave Magomed Ankalaev his only loss. And this loss really annoys me from Magomed Ankalaev because he should be undefeated. Magomed Ankalaev, a 7-1 favorite. And now we're looking at Paul Craig, who just got beat up by Bo Nickel, and he's just not a striker, and he's awful on the feet, and he's just not a good fighter. He literally has a triangle and an armbar. That's it. But Magomed Ankalaev, with one of the lowest IQ moments I've ever seen in my entire life, he shoots on a takedown with Paul Craig with like 10 seconds to go. Paul Craig locks up a triangle, and there's literally 1 second on the clock when Magomed Ankalaev taps. His coaches failed him. You have to be an absolute coward. No offense to any fighter, but you have to be an absolute coward to tap with 1 second to go. Like, I'd just risk going out cold. Do you guys get what I'm saying? Why on earth would you tap out with 1 second to go? This fight, whenever I watched it, really infuriated me. Magomed Ankalaev, although not my favorite fighter, he 100% should be undefeated, but he made one of the lowest IQ moves in UFC history. And not only did he put himself in a triangle, he also, well, Paul Craig put him in the triangle, but he tapped to it with 1 second to go. Like, dude, you had 1 second. Just risk getting submitted. The ref's going to separate you, and then you win. And you're now 21-0. But yeah, Paul Craig, of all people, took Ankalaev's O. He also took Jamal Hill's O. He broke Jamal Hill's arm. If you don't know, now you know. But yeah, man, journeyman Paul Craig got one of the most dangerous triangles at light heavyweight. Now, Wonderboy Nickel didn't want to take him down. Either way, this was 100% a fluke. If they ever fought again, Magomed would do illegal things to Paul Craig, and we all know that. Let's move on to the next one on this list, guys. We got Cheeto Vera versus Sean O'Malley. Now, this fight spawned the whole Sean O'Malley coping I'm still undefeated meme, and I kind of agree, but he did lose at the end of the day. Odds going in, O'Malley was a 3-1 favorite. O'Malley was the star coming in. He had the colorful hair. He had the colors of the Ecuadorian flag, which is where Marlon Vera's from, in his hair. And yeah, going into the fight, they seem to have a little bit of bad blood. O'Malley goes into the first round. He's piecing up Vera on the feet, you know, doing his thing, kind of just showing to be way faster than the stationary Marlon Vera. But Marlon Vera literally lands a 1 in a million perennial nerve kick, shuts off O'Malley's leg, and O'Malley's like struggling to stay up. His leg gives out. He falls down to the ground. Cheeto gets on top of him and ground and pound TKOs him. This was 100% a fluke, and it was proved in the rematch. O'Malley ended up fighting up to get the belt. He got a controversial win against Peorion, fought for the belt against Aljamain Sterling, KO'd Aljo, and then he requested to get that fight against Cheeto back. Cheeto 100% did not deserve a title shot, but they threw him in there against O'Malley. And yeah, man, O'Malley showed that it was an absolute fluke. He nailed Cheeto in the chin with a baseball bat-like knee, and surprisingly, Cheeto didn't go out. But he dominated Cheeto for all 5 rounds in the rematch, showing that he was the way better fighter. I thought he was a better fighter in the first fight. Listen, I'm not the biggest Sean O'Malley fan, but there's no doubt that Cheeto landing a perennial nerve kick and winning this fight was a fluke. I don't think you could beat Sean O'Malley without that kick ever landing. Either way, this had to be on this list for me. I think the better fighter on the night lost this fight. Let's go on to the next one, guys. We got Leon Edwards versus Kamaru Usman 2. Now, I added the stats on the screen for you guys to see. Going in, Usman was a 3-1 favorite. They're both on pretty hefty win streaks at the time. Leon actually hadn't lost since 2015 whenever he lost to Usman. He was on like a 10-fight. That's 10 wins in a row, bruv. He was on a 10-fight win streak, and Usman was on his way to breaking Anderson Silva's record. He was 15-0 in the UFC. If he'd have won this fight, he'd have tied Anderson Silva's win streak record. And yeah, man, Usman looked like he picked up right where he left off in the first fight, dominating Leon Edwards on the ground, just absolutely showing that he was the better fighter all the way around. Leon looked mentally checked out. Even the commentators are like, it's a moral victory for Leon Edwards to not get finished and go into a decision. In the fifth round, at the end of the 4th round on the stool, Leon Edwards' coach gives him like a Rocky-type speech. And yeah, man, Leon Edwards, even in the 5th round, he's still getting beat up. Usman's still doing his thing. And with 1 minute left on the clock, Leon Edwards lands a Hail Mary head kick KO and finishes Kamaru Usman to become the new welterweight champ. Now, one could argue that this is not a fluke because Leon set the head kick up, but come on, guys. Let's not pretend like this wasn't a fluke win. Usman was absolutely dominating Leon Edwards 4 rounds to 0, I believe, maybe 3 rounds to 1. Either way, he was dominating this fight. And yeah, you can go on to point out that Usman in the rematch got beat again by Leon, proving it wasn't a fluke. But I still think this is a fluke win, even if Leon went back to beat him a second time, just because I think Usman was the better fight on this night. Despite Leon landing a head kick on this specific night, I thought that Usman was the better fighter. He showed to be the more well-rounded fighter. He showed to be in control of the entire fight, landing 5 takedowns, controlling Leon, landing way more strikes than him. Like, it just all around, it was a Usman fight. Leon Edwards was just trying to be Mr. Technical, Mr. Perfect, and yeah, it worked out for him eventually in the 5th round. But this goes hand in hand with my video yesterday. How frustrating is Leon Edwards? Like, bro waits to the last minute of the fight in a 5-round fight to land a head kick. Like, bro, switch on before that. Either way, I think this is a fluke. Even if Leon Edwards went on to win the 3rd fight, it is what it is, bruv. Maybe we'll get a 4th fight one day between them, but probably not. Let's move on to the next one on this list, guys. We got Yuri Prochazka versus Glover Teixeira. Now, I know in this fight, Glover Teixeira made a lot of technical errors in the 5th round and throughout the fight. I understand that. This was an absolute back-and-forth war. You can argue that this was fight of the year 2022. This is one of my favorite fights of all time. If you haven't seen Yuri Prochazka versus Glover Teixeira when Yuri wins the belt, you have to rewatch this fight. This fight is insane. And if you knew what you knew about Glover and somebody were to tell you before this fight that Yuri Prochazka was going to submit Glover Teixeira, they would laugh in your face. Going into this fight, Yuri Prochazka had 2 submissions in his 36-fight career. And yeah, man, an absolute war back and forth. They're both making technical mistakes on the feet and the ground. And Glover just ended up, out of all people to catch Glover in a jiu-jitsu era, it was Yuri Prochazka locking up a rear naked choke, forcing the tap on Glover Teixeira in the 5th round with 28 seconds to go. How insane is that? If these guys fought another 100 times, I guarantee you Yuri Prochazka doesn't get a single submission. Like, this was a 1 in a million chance, or I'd say like 1 in 500 chance. He doesn't submit Glover Teixeira again if that fight happens. But Glover was 42, and yeah, man, it was still a banger. I still do think Glover was better than Yuri, especially when you look at Yuri's recent fights. He just seems to fight with his hands down, low fight IQ, chin up in the air on a silver platter. Yeah, man, I think Glover was the more skilled and better fighter, but he made a lot of technical errors, and Yuri made him pay for it with a 5th round submission. So Yuri can now say he submitted one of the best submission artists at light heavyweight and took his belt. Either way, respect to Prochazka, and he got the belt. He didn't keep it long, but he did his thing, you know. Let's move on to the next one on this list that I thought was a fluke, guys. We got Anthony Showtime Pettis KO in Wonderboy. He's the first fighter to ever KO Wonderboy. Wonderboy had an extensive kickboxing career, 57-0, never been KO'd, was undefeated. Wonderboy in the UFC, I think he'd been knocked down a couple times, but never KO'd. He was on his absolute top of his game. And And yeah, man, one of the best strikers in the welterweight division was Wonderboy, going up against kind of the journeyman at that point, Pettis. Kind of a journeyman, had lost a bunch of fights, and in the fight, he was getting pieced up by Wonderboy. I think Wonderboy even bloodied up his face, and he was piecing up Anthony Pettis, having his way, and Anthony Pettis, out of nowhere, jumps off the fence, lands a Superman punch, and KOs Wonderboy stiff. This hurt whenever I saw it, man, because I love Wonderboy. And seeing him go out cold, it was pretty brutal. I was like, man, of all people to KO Wonderboy, it's Anthony Pettis. And yeah, now Wonderboy just got KO'd again by Buckley, but he's 41 now, so it's much different. I think it was in 2018, so Wonderboy was like 35 when this fight happened, more closer to his prime. And yeah, man, I think 100% the better fighter lost on this night. I don't think Showtime lands that Superman punch. And like, if they fought like 50 times, he might land that Superman punch like 2 out of 50 times. You know what I'm saying? I think the better fighter on the night lost. I think this was, if he didn't land that Superman punch and KO Wonderboy, he would have been a dominant decision by Wonderboy, 30 or probably 50-45, because he was absolutely piecing up Pettis. Either way, respect to Anthony Pettis, the first man to KO Wonderboy. He can forever say that. Let's move on to the next one, guys. Another fluke I'd like to bring up is Ben Askren versus Robbie Lawler. Now, Ben Askren came from ONE FC, right? Coming in from ONE FC, looking to make his UFC debut at 34 years old, looking to make a splash. Ben Askren, known as this dominant grappler who was a champion in Bellator, champion in ONE, and people were like, could this guy come to the UFC? And surprisingly, he came to the UFC, and he was a favorite over Robbie Lawler. In the fight, immediately, Robbie Lawler goes in, rocks Ben Askren, slams him on the ground, is absolutely shredding his head into the ground. Robbie Lawler is just beating Ben Askren into a pulp. And somewhere in an exchange, they get on the feet, and Ben Askren catches Robbie Lawler in a bulldog choke. He has it somewhat locked up, and Herb Dean steps into this fight way too fast. Robbie Lawler didn't even seem to go out for a second, but as the second Herb Dean stopped the fight, he was not out. He was still conscious. Robbie Lawler goes a little crazy, but then he's like, look, man, I know you made a mistake, Herb Dean. But if you look at the stats, guys, I put the stats on the screen for you guys. Robbie Lawler landed 26 of 29 punches. That is insane accuracy. 26 of 29 significant strikes. Ben Askren landed like 3 strikes in the fight. And yeah, he got a submission. And looking at Ben Askren's career post Robbie Lawler getting KO'd by Masvidal in 5 seconds and then looking embarrassing against Damian Maia, I think in a rematch, Robbie Lawler would have absolutely smoked Ben Askren. So respect to my boy Ruthless. Look, Ben Askren made the most of it. He got it done. Set up the huge fight with Masvidal to become the laughingstock of the UFC. Getting fly knee in 5 seconds. Either way, I do think this fight was a fluke. I don't think if you play this fight out the same exact way, Ben Askren does not every single time. Like if you start the fight off the same way with Robbie Lawler pounding his head into the canvas, you do not end with Ben Askren getting a bulldog choke. That was a 1 in like 1,000 chance that happens. Either way, especially since who submits Robbie Lawler? Nobody. That was the first submission loss in Robbie Lawler's career in like years and years. Either way, guys, let's get on to the next one in this video. We got Yair Rodriguez versus the Korean Zombie. If you know, you know. This is the latest KO in UFC history. Going into this fight, Yair Rodriguez was still relatively on the come up. Korean Zombie, he was well established. He was probably on the latter half of his prime at this point. He was busting up Yair Rodriguez, though. Comfortably winning the striking exchanges, I'd say. They were close on strikes, but Korean Zombie was edging out every round. Probably up 3 rounds to 1 or 4 rounds to 0. And in the 5th round, they both put their hands up in the air. Korean Zombie's like, what's up, man? Let's go. And with 1 second to go, Korean Zombie rushes in, gets KO'd by a backwards elbow by Yair Rodriguez. One of the craziest KOs you'll ever see. I think it's an absolute fluke. I think if like I said, man, if you play that exchange out 200 times, that probably never happens again. Like Yair landed one of the most insane, luckiest elbows, I'd say. I know it's weird calling some of fighter lands luck because he set it up, but like I said, man, this doesn't happen rarely ever. Like a finish with 1 second to go in a 5-round fight is absolutely insane. Respect to Yair. He found a way to get it done. But I do think that Korean Zombie on that night was the better fighter. He just got caught by a strike by running with his chin first on a silver platter. So yeah, respect to Yair Rodriguez for capitalizing. Let's get on to the last one on this list, guys. This one, I will die on this hill. People will argue with me. I think that Chris Weidman beating Anderson Silva 2 times, both times were flukes. Now, let me explain. Chris Weidman was a young up-and-comer back in 2013, facing Anderson Silva, who was on an absolute tear. Anderson was 16-0 in the UFC, on a 7-year title run with 10 title defenses. He was 38 years old, so he was an old head. He was getting up there in age, you know. But Anderson still had it. He was still moving around like his prime self, so people were like, okay, Anderson's looking sharp. And in the fight, going in, Chris Weidman admittedly was outstriking Anderson. Anderson is kind of dancing around the octagon, being silly, just kind of taunting Chris Weidman, and he starts showboating. And in one moment of showboating, he does like this little like shoulder thing doing this, and Chris Weidman catches him on the chin, KO and Anderson Silva in the first round. I thought this was a fluke. I thought that Anderson Silva was still the best fighter. Maybe that's just cope. But the thing that really triggers me about this fight, obviously Anderson was going to get a rematch, right? Anderson was the longest reigning champion in UFC history with the most title defenses at that point. And yeah, man, he gets his rematch, and Chris Weidman checks a kick, I think in the first or second round, and breaks Anderson's leg. And it just felt like this fight never truly played out. Like, I still feel like I'm robbed of knowing who's the better fighter between Anderson and Weidman. You could say that Weidman was outstriking him in both fights, but I don't know, man. I still think, to some degree, Anderson was the better fighter. I know people say Anderson's overrated, including myself. He didn't beat the best guys, but man, like skill for skill in the striking and the grappling, I think he was better than Weidman. I don't know, man. It's tough for me to call it a full-blown fluke, but especially the first fight since he KO'd him, but it's tough, man. I still feel like I got robbed of knowing the true who is better of these two. You know what I'm saying? It felt incomplete. And how crazy is this? Here's one more crazy stat, guys. Chris Weidman, who checked Anderson Silva's leg, breaks his leg, one of the most gruesome injuries in the UFC. Years later, Chris Weidman throws a leg kick at Uriah Hall, who checks his kick, and he breaks his leg. How crazy that two of the guys with the most brutal leg breaks in UFC history are tied to one another with the same exact injury years later. It's insane that happened. Just the irony of that, for Chris Weidman to break his leg after breaking Anderson's leg years prior. Either way, guys, these, in my opinion, were some of the biggest UFC flukes. Some of these you guys are going to disagree with. I don't expect you to agree with all of them. Some of them you're going to say it's not a fluke, he set it up. I understand that, but to me, a lot of these, the better fighter lost in the night by a Hail Mary KO or anything like that, or etc. You guys get it. Listen, guys, at the end of the video now, I just want to say thank you guys for all the support. You guys have been killing it. The live streams, the donations, the members, the subscribers. Like, you guys are absolutely killing it. The channel's been doing amazing. And I just want to say I really appreciate everyone that's been showing support and love to the channel, guys. I'm only on my not even 3 months into YouTube, and this is life-changing for me. So I really am grateful. Thank you to everyone that watches the channel, supports me. And yeah, guys, that's, I don't know. We're almost at 2,000 subscribers. So let's keep killing it, guys. I'm going to keep coming with the daily bangers. And yeah, boys, as I always say, I'm out, and peace.